Hi everyone, welcome back to English Lab. I'm Luis. Today we have the second B2 short story. This one is about a moment of profound disorientation, when you realize you've lost yourself completely. It's a story about confusion, about searching, and ultimately about finding your way back. These B2 stories explore complex human experiences. Download the study guide PDF in the description for advanced vocabulary, comprehension questions, and reflection prompts. This is a deeply personal story about identity and rediscovery. Let's begin. I want to tell you about a period in my life when I completely lost myself. Not metaphorically, literally lost who I was. And it took me years to realize what had happened. It started about 10 years ago. I had been working on my own as a freelancer for a couple of years. Business was good. I was making money. I was successful by conventional standards. I was getting clients, completing projects, building a reputation. But something was shifting. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started to change, not intentionally. It was gradual. I became more focused on money, not just as a means to survive, but as the measure of my worth and success. I started taking projects I didn't care about because they paid more. I started working with clients I didn't like because they had bigger budgets. I started sacrificing the work I actually wanted to do for work that would make me richer. And alongside this shift, something else happened. I stopped spending time with the people I loved. I convinced myself it was temporary. I said, I'm just going to work hard for this year. After that, I'll have time for relationships. But that year passed, and then another year, and then another. I canceled plans with friends. I missed family dinners. I skipped my mother's birthday party because I had a client meeting. I was present physically but absent emotionally in my relationships. I also stopped doing the things that brought me joy. I loved reading, but I stopped reading because I said reading wasn't productive. I loved writing personal essays, but I stopped because they didn't generate income. I loved traveling, but I stopped because traveling wasn't efficient. Every activity in my life became filtered through this question. Is this productive? Will this make me money? I became someone I didn't recognize. And here's the strange part. I wasn't miserable in an obvious way. I wasn't crying or depressed. I was just empty. I was going through life on autopilot. I was functioning but not living. I remember one moment very clearly. It was about 5 years into this period. I was at a party with friends. My best friend was telling a funny story. Everyone was laughing, and I realized that I wasn't laughing. I was watching them laugh. I was observing life rather than participating in it. And in that moment, I thought, who am I? And I couldn't answer the question. I didn't recognize the person I had become. I didn't like the person I had become. But I also didn't know who I actually was anymore. It was a terrifying moment of clarity. That night, I went home and I tried to write down what I knew about myself. And I realized I couldn't. I couldn't write down my values because I wasn't living according to any values. I couldn't write down what brought me joy because I had eliminated joy from my life. I couldn't write down who I was because I had been so focused on productivity and money that I had erased myself. This sounds dramatic, but it's true. I had lost myself so completely that I didn't know who I was anymore. A story about losing yourself and the long journey of finding your way back. Download the study guide PDF to explore the advanced vocabulary from this story. Imperceptibly, autopilot, clarity, regression, aligned, and more. The guide includes comprehension questions, discussion prompts about identity and authenticity, and reflective writing activities. Now, let me share the core message. The process of finding myself again was slow and painful. It didn't happen overnight. It took conscious effort and a lot of reflection. First, I had to acknowledge what had happened. I had to admit to myself, I've lost my way. I've become someone I don't want to be. I made choices that took me away from myself. That acknowledgement was difficult. It meant admitting failure. It meant taking responsibility for the years I had wasted. Then I had to ask myself, what do I actually want? Not what do I think I should want? Not what will make me the most money, but what do I actually want? And I had to sit with that question for a long time, because I had spent so many years not listening to myself that I had to relearn how to hear my own desires and preferences. Slowly, I started to make different choices. I started to say no to projects that didn't align with my values. I started to turn down clients I didn't like. I took a salary cut to work on projects that mattered to me. I started reading again. I started writing essays again. I started traveling again. Most importantly, I started investing time in my relationships. I called my mother regularly. I had long conversations with my best friend. I showed up for people I cared about. It was terrifying because it meant making less money. And money had become the measure of my success. Choosing relationships over money, choosing fulfillment over income, that felt like failure. It felt like regression. But something shifted. As I made these new choices, I started to remember who I was. Or rather, I started to discover who I actually wanted to be. The person who emerged from this process was different from who I was before I got lost. I wasn't going back to a previous version of myself. I was becoming a new version, someone who had learned from the mistake of getting lost and who was now more intentional about staying true to himself. Now, I'm very careful about what I say yes to. I'm very intentional about how I spend my time and energy. I check in with myself regularly. Is this still aligned with who I am? Does this reflect my values? Am I still myself? And I've learned that getting lost is actually not that uncommon. Many people lose themselves to ambition, to money, to relationships, to caregiving, to work. You can lose yourself to almost anything if you're not paying attention. But here's what I also learned. You can find your way back. It takes awareness. It takes courage. It takes saying no to things that don't serve you. It takes choosing yourself even when it costs you something. And the most important thing I learned is this. The cost of staying lost is higher than the cost of finding your way back. Because a life lived inauthentically, a life lived on autopilot, a life where you're observing rather than participating, that's a life half-lived. And I refuse to half-live. I refuse to spend my years accumulating money or status or achievement while losing myself in the process. So if you're reading this or listening to this and you have a nagging sense that you might be lost, that you're not living as your authentic self, I want to tell you, pay attention to that feeling. It's important, and it's never too late to find your way back. The tragedy isn't losing your way. The tragedy is staying lost and never realizing it. The study guide PDF in the description has everything. Advanced vocabulary, comprehension questions, deep discussion prompts, and writing activities that will help you reflect on your own life and choices. If you're enjoying these B2 stories, subscribe to English Lab and turn on the notification bell. We have more complex, meaningful narratives coming every week. Comment below, have you ever felt lost? How did you find your way back? Or are you currently searching? Thanks for listening. See you in the next English Lab short story.